For 2023, Gotrax has gone dual motor for the very first time, and they've done it in the most Gotrax way possible. This is the Gotrax GX1 and GX2. If you're thinking of getting one of these, you need to watch this video because we're going to show you some performance data I promise you won't see anywhere else, and it will affect your decision about which one you should buy. For example, if you think you could tell which one accelerates quickest by looking at the power specs, you'd be wrong. We're going to help you figure out which one might be for you, tell you what other scooters we like for this price, and whether we think you should just wait for the upcoming GX3. Compared to single motor scooters like your typical rental scooter, dual motor electric scooters are bigger, heavier, faster, and in some cases have a lot more range. So let's check out the specs. The two main differences between them, other than the GX2 comes in light gray and the GX1 in black, are that the GX2 has a specified top speed of 35 miles per hour versus 30 for the GX1, and the GX2 has a 33% larger battery. Yes, the power spec is also very different, but a higher spec for motor power often doesn't mean anything when it comes to actual performance. This is why we test every scooter in exactly the same way, and strangely, we're still the only channel that does this. So the big upside of riding a dual motor electric scooter is they basically just don't slow down at all riding up most hills. Another thing I love is that when you have top speeds like this of 30 and 35 miles per hour, you get the option of riding in a completely different way. Most of the time, you'll still want to ride in the bike lane like usual, but on these, you can just flow with traffic when you need to. Other than the colors, the two scooters are visually identical, and surprisingly, you can't even tell them apart by casually riding them around because performance is basically the same other than top speeds and range. For the price, they've got all the things you'd expect, and most of the components are ones we haven't seen before in any other Gotrax scooters. The dash is easy to read even in bright sunlight and does a good job telling you all the stuff you need to know, like speed, battery remaining, the 3 speed modes plus walk mode, and even a nice trip meter right here. It's also got cruise control, which is initially turned off. What the display doesn't show you is your exact voltage, but the battery meter works really well, so you kind of don't need it. There's no option to switch to single motor, but it does something better. You get 2 acceleration profiles. Normal mode is when the wheels are solid on the display here, and when they're blinking, that means you're in power mode, kind of like the turbo button on some older scooters. I love thumb throttles, and the GX series uses one we've never seen before. It's like a mini version of the one from the Nami and Wolfgang GT, except this one has 0 dead zone. The other thing I like about it is when you're riding, your fingers can cover the brakes and throttle at the same time, so you can switch quickly from acceleration to brakes, and it's a really comfortable hand position for long rides. The throttle response is very responsive when you put it into turbo mode. They've done a really good job just mapping the power to the throttle. There's no slop, no delay, and it lets you do things like just hammer the throttle halfway through the corner without spinning the front wheel. If I have a criticism, it's that 80% of the throttle comes on in the first 50% of travel, which can make it a little twitchy if you're trying to ride at a steady 20 miles per hour in power mode. A feature I didn't expect to find is right here. There's a USB port that will charge your phone, and that could come in handy if you like to mount your phone to the handlebars for navigation. Both scooters exclusively use 0 start mode, which means you don't need to kick off to get moving. You just push the throttle. Of course, that means if you bump the throttle accidentally, the scooter can just take off. So to avoid this, they've added park mode, which is similar to what Segway does on many of their scooters now. And I don't love it. During the range test, it had a tendency to drop into park mode just as the light was turning green. But to exit park mode, you just tap once on the minus key and off you go. And this doesn't seem like a feature that you can completely disable. Another safety feature is that the scooter requires you to enter a code to turn it on. It comes set to 000, but you can customize this to your own code, and you can completely disable this feature so no code is needed. Gotrax has got a lot of important little details right on these scooters. For example, the GX series has these cool looking grips that clamp to the bars at both ends and stay put, because grips that slip and rotate while you're riding can be a huge distraction. I also love that the whole scooter comes pre-assembled with the controls right where you want them. You just bolt the bars in place, check your tire pressure, and you're ready to go. The bars have these locating holes that lock them in place, plus the tapered shape of the bars and pullback angle look and feel really good because they put your wrists at a more natural angle than straight bars. The stem latch is easy to use, feels solid, and latches down to the deck with this hook. When I first saw it, I thought the hook would fall out if you move the scooter around, but check it out, it stays put. Another detail they got right is this magnet right here. It keeps the latch/bag hook from clanking around against the stem while you're riding. So we're seeing a trend here. The GX1 and 2 are not packed with features. There are no turn signals, no app, and you can't control how much regen brake you get. But other than missing turn signals, the GXs do everything we expect at this price point, and the features that are there just plain work. You can taste the engineering dollars, as I like to say. Another example, let's look inside the deck. On some scooters, you'll find a nightmare of spaghetti inside with, yellow wires plugged into red ones, but instead we find a custom engineered wiring harness where all the connectors are sealed, and even though they're all black on the outside, they're actually color coded. Even the way the deck opens is thoughtfully done. Check out these rubber flaps so you don't need to peel back the whole deck rubber to get to the screws. Okay, let's keep going out to the wheels. Plug and play wiring continues out here at the motor cables, so if you ever need to change a tire, you unplug the motor wires so you don't have to wrestle with a wheel that's attached to the scooter. The tires themselves are 10" by 3", and contrary to what the spec sheet says, they're tubeless. The advantage of being tubeless is that they're much less prone to pinch flats if you hit a sharp edge, and they work better with sealant if you get a puncture. Both scooters come standard with cable-operated disc brakes, and the spec sheet says electronic braking as well, but if it's there, I really can't feel it. That said, the brakes are absolutely outstanding. They don't require strong hands, and as you'll see, the braking distance beats many scooters which cost twice as much. Part of the reason the braking distance is so short is this suspension right here, which is my absolute favorite thing about these scooters. It's unusual to see hydraulic shocks on sub $1,500 scooters, and surprisingly, these are really good ones. They're adjustable for preload, not damping, but I don't mind that because the damping feels really good right out of the box. Fender protection is pretty good from both scooters, both having a fairly typical IP54 water resistance rating, but I think your shoes might still get a little wet. At the bottom is this big, beefy kickstand. It's about triple the thickness of their usual stands. It's easy to hook with your foot, but they've tucked it in so far that you have to lean the scooter away from yourself to see it. The handlebars are a little short at 39.5 inches above the deck. Not annoyingly short, but just not as luxuriously tall as the Apollo City. The deck itself is actually very short by our measurements, but practically speaking feels just a little short because your front foot can grab a few extra inches over here. I love the chunky, heavy-duty look and feel of the GX1 and GX2, but there is a certain cheese factor you should know about. It's not a big deal, but this big beefy thing here is a plastic cover over an otherwise solid-looking neck, and there's a little more down here. I'm on the fence as to whether I think they should have just left it all off or not. There is zero cheese factor in how it rides though. The feel of the scooter is ultra solid.
Oh, this is really nice. You need two things to have a really good feeling scooter. One of them is, good suspension, if you're riding on bad pavement anyway. And the other one is a really solid frame, because if you have good suspension but like a squeaky, rattly, flexy frame, it's still gonna feel bad. But this has both. This has that just solid frame. There's no flex in these bars, there's no flex in the stem, there are no rattles. You can hear it, right? Oh, rattles coming from the scooter. I'm banging this thing around pretty well right now. There's not a rattle coming from it. And so that paired with good suspension, ooh, that is a nice combination.
The throttle feels predictable and easy to use. The wide, blunt profile tires give it an exceptionally stable feel in turns, and the whole scooter just does what you expect it to do. It feels great for normal riding around, but it's one of those scooters that gives a lot back, so the more you get used to it and the harder you ride it, the better it feels. Performance is up next, but first, don't forget you can use coupon code RiderGuide100 to save $100 on the GX1, GX2, or GX3. You'll also find links down in this video's description that you can click on to support this channel. And any updated coupon codes we find for you will be down there too. Claimed top speeds are 30 miles per hour and 35 miles per hour, and I have good news. The tested top speeds of both scooters beat their specs, going 30.6 miles per hour and 35.6 miles per hour. And the speedometers are surprisingly accurate, and this is another example of the finished product feel that you get from these scooters. We fully charged both scooters, and then I range tested them back to back on the same test course on the same day. The GX1 covered 19.9 miles, and the GX2 went 24% further at 24.7 miles because it has a larger battery. Incidentally, that's why its tested weight is 1.6 pounds more than the GX1. The acceleration test surprised me, and that's why I love scientifically testing scooters. Despite the power specs for the scooters being 600 watts times 2 for the GX1 and 800 watts times 2 for the GX2, the less expensive GX1 does 0 to 30 in 9.9 seconds, and the GX2 did it in 10.1. And we had similar results on the hill climb. The GX1 climbed our 200-foot long, 20-foot high test hill in 9.4 seconds, whereas the more powerful GX2 was the same or slightly slower, reaching the top in 9.5 seconds, showing again while performance testing beats spec sheets every time. Stopping distance were very similar as you'd expect, since both are equipped with exactly the same brakes and suspension, the GX2 stopping shorter at 9.3 feet to the 9.5 feet of the GX1. Overall, braking is exceedingly easy to control, very strong, and among the very best we've tested. Okay, now for the downside of dual motor electric scooters. They're much harder to just carry around or carry upstairs than your typical single motor scooter. In fact, even relative to other dual motor electric scooters of similar performance, the tested weight of these two are about 5 pounds heavier at 73 and 75 pounds. So what other scooters should you be checking out at this price point? Well, a couple years ago, there just weren't many good dual motor electric scooters for around $1,500. But now that it's 2023, we've got some really great scooters to choose from.
This is what I call a target-rich environment.
The dual motor Apollo City 2023 has quickly become the benchmark for this category because it's just such a good all-arounder. Its range and top speed fall right in between the GX1 and GX2. It costs a little more than the GX2, but when I rode them back to back, the Apollo felt noticeably more premium and polished in terms of style, throttle response, and the feel of the dedicated regen brake. The Solar EQ, on the other hand, has a bit more of a raw performance feel to it, with its 41.5 mph top speed and hydraulic brakes, but with an overall design that feels a bit less modern. Then there's the Mantis V2, which is an updated version of one of the original sports scooters. We love the smooth sine wave throttle and that it has the quickest acceleration of the group, but it's the only scooter on this list that still uses tubed rather than tubeless tires. And let's not ignore the yet to be released 38 mph GX3, which looks like the same scooter again, but it's actually very different from the GX1 and GX2. Looking at the specs versus the GX2, it costs $500 more, weighs 94 pounds, has 44% more battery, and you also get 4 fully adjustable hydraulic shocks plus 11-inch tires, putting it in a completely different category of scooter. When I first heard Gotrax was going dual motor, I was honestly a little worried for the rest of the scooter companies because Gotrax has this reputation for pricing things impossibly low. But while I think the GX1 and GX2 are great values, they're not going to completely disrupt the market. But in Gotrax's typical style, they are a little better than they should be for the price. What I am really impressed with is how fully baked these scooters are, and by that I mean while they're not packed with features, they have all the stuff most people care about and everything just works the way it should, with the possible exception of the park feature, but you know, I'm sure I'd get used to that. So which one would I pick, the GX1 or GX2? Well, since all the visible hardware is the same, acceleration is the same, and the weight's not really different, it really comes down to the $200 price difference versus 5 more miles of range and 5 more miles per hour top speed. That's 24% further and 16% faster for 15% more dollars. So the value is there unless you absolutely know that you'll never need the speed or range. I'm leaning towards the GX2, but you know, it's hard to imagine anybody regretting buying either one. Don't forget to use coupon code RiderGuide100 to save $100, and you'll find any updated coupon codes down below in the video's description. I'm Paul from Rider Guide. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing. Enjoy your ride.